Hello everybody, this is Austin Hill-Shaw, founder of Creativity Matters and author of the Shoreline of Wonder on Being Creative. Today I want to talk to you about meaning. Meaning is a really important aspect of living a creative life, of being a creator. And today I'm actually working on cleaning up my office and my desk. I had a lot of unfinished projects, I had a lot of things in a pile, and I've just been having a great time this morning going through my office and clearing things out. It feels so good already. And while I was clearing out, I came across a book that was very impactful in my understanding of the world and the way people tick. And before I share that book with you, I want to give you a little context by why this book was so impactful. So when I was in architecture school, I obtained a scholarship through the Rotary Foundation in order to go study for an academic year in the Basque Country in northern Spain. And I had many different reasons why I was going over there, but one of them was I knew that there were active terrorist cells within the Basque Country. And I was interested in why there would be a group of people fighting against another group of people, protesting in some sort of way. And it's interesting because I moved to Spain just 3 weeks after 9/11. So this idea of terrorism was kind of fresh in my mind. It was, it was probably one of the biggest things that had happened to the United States in a long, long time. So I'm over there in the Basque Country and looking around, and one thing that you need to understand, what I learned while I was in the Basque Country is this. In World War I, if you looked at World War I, most of the practices revolved around what was called trench warfare, where you're sort of establishing a line, digging these trenches, filling with bomb wires and mustard gas, and it was pretty awful. And yet it was sort of contained. Most of the trench warfare was happening out in the countryside. By World War II, there was bombings of major cities, of London, of Berlin, and of other places. And the stepping stone between the tactics used in World War I and World War II was something which was called the bombing of Guernica. And essentially what was happening is that there was a dictator, between World War I and World War II, there was a dictator named Franco working in Spain who was trying to unify all aspects of Spain under one rule. And the Basques in the north didn't really want to have anything to do with that. And so Franco called up Adolf Hitler and said, hey, I know that I've heard that you're working on some technologies, some new war technologies. Would you like to try that out on some people I'm having trouble with in the north? And sure enough, Hitler agreed, and he sent these planes over to the Basque Country. And during the middle of the day, without any warning, those planes dropped thousands of bombs on this town of Guernica. I've been through Guernica before. It's a beautiful town by this estuary, and but to think that this was the first civilian bombing in the history of the world, I mean, it left a real huge scar and trauma in the minds of the Basque people. The other thing is that Franco forbade them from speaking their language. And Basque is a really interesting language. It's very old, and it's totally unrelated to any of the other languages in Europe. And so Franco was preventing them. They said you can only speak Spanish. So that in itself was an insult to the culture of the Basque people. But while I was over there, I still had this question in my mind, why do you continue to carry this out? I get that there was this atrocity, this trauma that happened decades before. Why is it still being played out? And again, the question just sort of lingered in my mind, especially since the Basque, as I knew it in the early 2000s, it was beautiful, robust cities. The Guggenheim Museum had just been put in there in Bilbao. There's a lot of industry there, so people were living a pretty good life. And I'd always associated with terrorism with the underdog. So I was in Spain for a year in San Sebastian, and then most of a year in Bilbao. And then I returned to Ojai, California. And one day I'm walking around Ojai, California, and I came across this book that I'm about to show you. And a book that just almost in the cover itself kind of let me know what was happening and why this tradition of terrorism kept going. And it's a book by a guy named Chris Hedges called War is a Force That Gives Us Meaning. War is a force that gives us meaning. How's that for a title? Look at this black, I mean, it's like, wow. I took it off the shelf, immediately bought it. I want to read a little bit from the back of this, okay? As a veteran war correspondent, Chris Hedges has survived ambushes in Central America, imprisonment in Sudan, and a beating by Saudi military police. He has seen children murdered for sport in Gaza, and petty thugs elevated to war heroes in the Balkans. Hedges, who is a former divinity student, has seen war at its worst and knows too well that those who pass through it, has seen war at its worst and knows too well that those who pass through it, war can be exhilarating and even addictive. It gives us purpose, meaning, and a reason for living. Okay? Again, he's saying here that war is something that gives us purpose, meaning, and a reason for living. Now, first of all, here's a war correspondent who's a divinity student, right? Trying to understand the spiritual values in things, which is kind of ironic. But I can relate to him. I've looked at a lot of religious texts and tried to understanding my understanding of creativity. The other thing that he's saying is that it can be exhilarating and even addictive to be in war. And we know from that's true. If there's war veterans out there, like one of the things that, the wars, it's horrifying, it's scarring, and yet it leaves them with a sense of meaning. It leaves them a sense of like, that was one of the most exciting times of my life, okay? So this is a really interesting thing that we need to think about. Like, where is that meaning and that excitement coming from? Well, essentially where it's coming from is it's relating to the reptilian brainstem, that part of our brain that is all fear-based, but is at the base of our brain. It's something that we, like we said, we share with other animals, right? This desire to fight or flight, it's really rooted within us. And yet, as human beings who are wanting to bring forth our humanity, we have to start actively developing different ways by which meaning comes into our lives, how meaning comes into our lives. And there are two ways that I can see that we can start to actively cultivate a meaning that isn't based on war and fighting, but is based on creativity, of moving forward. Now, I don't want to argue that there hasn't been a lot of creativity and innovation within war campaigns. And yet at the same time, all war always perpetuates the cycle of what we call karma, imprints, traumas that this next generation has to heal, okay? That's part of it. So again, what can we do in order to bring meaning to our lives that doesn't rely and sort of subverts this, rises above that reptilian brainstem? There are two things that we can do, I see. The first one is to actively cultivate a mission statement, okay? Here Chris Hedges is saying it gives us purpose, meaning, and a reason for living, okay? Like, the thing that I've learned is if you don't articulate what your purpose is, if you don't articulate what your mission is, the world is constantly handing you things that you think you should be doing. I mean, it comes in the form of advertising. It comes in the form of what your parents think you should be doing. It comes in the form of like what your religious or social structure thinks you should be doing. All those things are giving you things that may look like purpose. And in the case of war, for people who don't have an articulated, like suddenly there's a war campaign, oh, there's the enemy. Oh, wow, now I have something to fight against, right? It activates that part of the reptilian brainstem. So people do get meaning out of that. But again, as creators, what we want to do is actively start developing and articulating what our mission is in life, what our mission is. For me, my mission is, which I've expressed many times before, is to empower others as creators. It took me a long time to figure that out. Your mission, if you haven't articulated your mission or your purpose right now, can be just said, my mission is to discover my mission. That in and of itself will start to hone your awareness and make your life more creative just by having that intention out there, okay? So that's number one, crafting your mission statement, okay? That brings meaning to our lives. The second is more experiential. Okay, the second thing is creativity itself. When we connect with the world and we affect it in a meaningful way, we put ourselves into flow states, and those flow states are experientially very meaningful to us. I mean, think of those magic moments of your lives, some of which you're actively cultivating, and some of which suddenly you just feel your connection to the universe, or feel the connection to the people in your lives, or your community, or your kids, or your spouse, where suddenly whatever defense structures you have in you collapse for a moment, and you feel yourself completely connected to the world around you, completely connected to the world around you. Those experiences, in my experience, are beyond words, and yet they are deeply meaningful. They're a meaning that transcends language, and that is actually what we are going for when we are living a creative life. We don't, as Joseph Campbell would say, I don't think people are as interested in the meaning of life as much as the experience of being alive. That is actually, that is what we are trying to create in living a creative life. Those who actively live creative lives are those who find meaning, deep meaning, just by the experience of living. And through the experience of living and through following their creative pursuits, they find themselves healing aspects of themselves that don't serve them any longer, right? And they find themselves rising up into new levels of awareness, new levels of openness, new levels of energy, new levels of compassion, and new levels of wisdom. It's amazing what happens when you actually live a creative life. So, as you can see, we're on a spectrum. On one hand, we could call this is the fear basis, right? And a lot of people probably most of the world's population work from this level of fear, okay? Am I going to run out of food? Am I going to run out of shelter? Am I going to run out of water, okay? How do I get that? A lot of people are just subsisting on that sort of level, okay? And there's even in the so-called developed world, there's people who are running around sort of like, rats in a maze, trying to live up to whatever shoulds have been placed on them. Oh, I got to do this in order to attain the dream. I have to do this sort of thing. No, you don't. You don't. Your life is a gift, and what you can do is start to articulate your mission. When you do that, it hones your awareness, and then it moves toward this realm, this experience of being alive, of not living in a world that's basically out to get you, but a world that's out here to support you, okay? That has always been here to support you, with the air that you breathe, with the ground that you walk in, with the rain, all of these sorts of things. We are part of a dynamic, interdependent, deeply mysterious universe. And the more that we can sort of, again, articulate what we want to proactively do with our lives and bring that forward in the world, that starts to bring us more into those ineffable, beyond world experiences of being alive, which for me is what we're going for in trying to live a life, and living a life that is creative, okay? And consciously choosing to live a creative life, okay? So anyways, this has been Austin Hill Shaw, founder of Creativity Matters and author of the Shoreline of Wonder, reminding you to connect deeply, to make a difference, and to inspire creativity in others. And, in this case, to write your mission statement if you haven't done one already, okay? If you have any comments for me on this, please leave them below in the area below this. If you're not on my website, www.austinhillshaw.com, please go there. That's where you can find a lot of free resources and things that will help you in your path of becoming more and more deeply creative in your life. Again, you are a creator first and foremost. We all are, right? That is why it feels so good to be in there. That is why it's so deeply meaningful when we find ourselves in the space of creative flow. So go out and do that, okay? Thank you so much.